to complain about the abuses of Scientology. Well, the next speaker is known by many here, Peter Alexander. He's a local businessman, ex-Scientologist, Clearwater resident. Mr. Alexander.
Well, I'm not going to be speaking in favor of Scientology today, as you might imagine. But 10 years ago, this was me on the cover of Celebrity magazine. This magazine is published by Scientology Celebrity Center in Hollywood. And the occasion was, well, frankly, I gave them a lot of money. So if any of you would like to be on the cover of Celebrity, there's the key right there. But actually, also, I was designing Universal Studios Florida, and I did a lot of the attractions down there, King Kong attraction and Back to the Future, E.T., that sort of thing.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
Don't have to.
Oh, can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You don't want to miss any of these golden words. Anyway, so, you know, I'm going to try and give you a little bit of an insight into what it was like to be a, quote, celebrity down here. I moved here after we opened Universal Studios Florida, basically at the instigation of my ex-wife. And I think the bottom line on that is that my ex-wife really liked Scientology, and I really liked my ex-wife. So she indicated that if we were going to stay married, then I needed to come on down here, because we were going to go up the bridge together. And what people do when they come here is they go up the upper levels of Scientology, which is supposed to make you spiritually free. And it also costs about $380,000 a person. So basically the idea is that you're going to buy your spiritual freedom, if you can believe anything as ridiculous as that. But little did I know, I'd only been lightly involved when I was in Los Angeles, and as some of you may know, cults are not uncommon in Hollywood. In fact, my dad, who was an actor before me, told me that the country's tilted and all the loose nuts just kind of, you know, basically slipped down there. And so it's a very common thing. And I suppose I was one of them. Anyway, so my ex-wife indicated that we had to come down here to Clearwater because this is the only place in the world where you can get to the upper levels, which is supposedly going to make you happy. Suffice to say, that didn't happen. But when we were here, we were also treated like celebrities. If you are a contributor and you are wealthy, I was once wealthy, Scientology helped me with that problem. And if you still have money, they throw giant formal events where you appear in tuxedo and your wife in a ball gown, and then they have big bands, and they'll have banquets in your honor, all the time soliciting you for money, basically, is the point of that. And you live in a very sheltered world. We didn't really know anything about the negative aspects of Scientology, and particularly anything about the negative aspects in Clearwater. We would see the other celebrities, obviously a little more important than me, having contributed more money, such as John Travolta, being totally isolated. And you know, you might be wondering why somebody like that is in Scientology. It's because they are kept away from any negative comment about Scientology. When he comes here, he flies in his private jet to St. Pete Airport. He hops into his classic Mustang that he drives over and parks inside the Fort Harrison. And then from that point on, he is escorted and basically kept away from everybody else, even the regular Scientologists. They actually select his dinner companions and his luncheon companions by going through people's folders to make sure that they are, folders are the counseling records, to make sure that they are suitable for John to speak to. And it's a very select group. So, you know, they didn't do quite that level with me. I didn't give them that much money. But it was a very sheltered environment. We did notice a few things. My favorite counselor had two boys, and they lived in the Quality Inn, which is down the road here on US 19. And we would go over there and pick them up on the weekends because they basically were denied access to their parents 6 days out of the week. They stayed there in what is basically, can only be described as a dump. It's an old run-down motel. without their parents. Their parents worked from 8 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night, 6 days a week. And they were cared for, if you call it that, by 1 or 2 Sea Org members. So we didn't think that that was a proper way to bring kids up. So every weekend we'd go over there and pick up the 2 boys. They finally actually told us to stop that because we were inculcating these boys in the Sea Org, these boys who were living at poverty level, with middle-class values, you know, by basically giving them 3 squares and a roof over their head on the weekends. I actually wrote up, because when you were in Scientology, you're supposed to write these things up. I actually wrote up a complaint about that, and that was quickly put in file number 13, that circular one that's in every office. As long as I continue to contribute to Scientology, because it's basically a money machine, they treated me very well. The minute I had a problem, however, the situation completely changed. And eventually I did run into a problem, and that was with my ex-wife, who was going faster up the bridge than I. She was more dedicated and also being trained. And as part of her training, she essentially learned to think like L. Ron Hubbard. They actually have a course where they teach you how to think like L. Ron Hubbard, if you can imagine that. And as soon as she finished that course, called the Data Series Evaluators course, she immediately announced that I was a bad Scientologist, and this was essentially the reason to get a divorce. Now, we'd been married for 15 years, and people generally thought that we were the happiest couple that they knew. We had 3 kids, and so this didn't seem quite right to me, even though she had had it as one of her wins on course, you see. And so I suggested we go for Scientology marriage counseling. Now, Scientology marriage counseling did not work in any way, shape, or form. I later found out, after I got out, that Mr. Hubbard actually was a bigamist who was married to 2 women at the same time in the years 1946 and 1947, and that he probably knew nothing about marriage and nothing about families that was good. But I didn't know that at the time, so I tried Scientology marriage counseling. It didn't work, and as a result, we got a divorce. And she moved away and continued to be a Scientologist, but she moved away to California. I stayed here with my company, the Totally Fun Company, continuing to design theme park attractions. And then one of my staff members got on the internet, and that staff member is sitting in the back right now, Patricia, and she's making little devil signs over her head, got on the internet and found out the truth about Scientology. Now, I used to go around referring to L. Ron Hubbard as my hero, L. Ron Hubbard, if you can believe that, because I thought he was a naval hero, and he was an incredible scientist, and he'd done all these wonderful things. Well, Patricia found out that none of that stuff was true. In fact, just about always the opposite was true. And as soon as I found this out, I thought, oh boy, what have I been involved in here for 20 years? Needless to say, I got out of Scientology real fast. So one of the best things that has ever happened is that the internet can penetrate the veil of secrecy that Scientology spreads around itself, and particularly around those in the celebrity category, because there's no way that you can stop that level of freedom of speech. So the internet is really basically going to cause Scientology to have to tell the truth, and we're going to make sure that it does. But in any event, as soon as I got out of Scientology, the whole world looked completely different to me, and particularly Clearwater. My business was in downtown Clearwater, and whereas I had thought, well, you know, there's just a lot of Scientologists around, when you're not in Scientology, suddenly you look at them and you think, wait a second, the fleet's in, but it's not our Navy. Who are these folks? And you realize that you're in somewhat of a jeopardy situation. And as we read more things, we read what had happened to Mayor Cazares and how he had been harassed. And we read that basically that's what they did with all the money that people like me had been contributing. They used it to pay lawyers and private investigators to harass and destroy anyone who would tell the truth about Scientology, which is that in the final analysis it didn't work. And that's how they kept going. It was a money machine, and they just kept the secrecy going. And once I found out that, I knew that not only did I have to get out of Scientology, but we had to to move from Clearwater, at least from downtown Clearwater, where we were constantly surrounded by people who could be putting us under surveillance. And we weren't sophisticated. We wouldn't have been able to tell if they were doing that. So we wrote a letter to the mayor. At the time, it was Mayor Garvey, and asked what she thought we could do. And the only thing that she could say was that, well, you ought to move to the countryside area. That was the best she had to offer. Because basically, I felt at that time the city had given up. Scientology had really taken over. We ended up moving to Tampa so that my employees who were nervous would be safe. But I just couldn't turn my back on Clearwater. I had lived here for 7, 8 years. I liked the community. I thought it was a nice town. The local people were nice folks. So I felt we had to do something for Clearwater. And then we were approached by the Lisa McPherson Trust, and that really provided us an opportunity to do something for the town. The first thing that we did was go help find space in downtown for the Lisa McPherson Trust. We went to a number of office buildings, all of which had space available, including the SunTrust building, the Clearwater Towers, the Barnett Bank building, now I guess the Nations Bank building downtown, the AmSouth building. All those buildings had space, but as soon as we announced that we were the Lisa McPherson Trust and that we had an interest to tell the truth about Scientology, suddenly those spaces just disappeared. They all dried up. There was no space available. And I could see that the town was in fear. And then I began to see why the town was in fear. As we rode around with Stacy Brooks, who is a member of the Lisa McPherson Trust and an activist on this subject for a number of years, I noticed people were tailing us, and that they had put as many as 5 private investigators on us just because she was with us. A couple days later, she came to visit us over in Tampa, and Patricia and I were having lunch in the restaurant right behind my office when suddenly Patricia noticed that there was a private investigator right there casing Stacy as Stacy walked in the door. Patricia pointed at the guy, and the guy ran out of the building, basically, and we ran down the street and photographed him. We called the Tampa police and found out that that was indeed an offense, that they were harassing her and us, but that there was probably nothing we could do about it unless we caught them on a regular basis. So I could understand the fear that people in Clearwater have. When I lived here, I saw none of that as a Scientologist. And you should know that the people who are the wealthy contributors to Scientology are basically good folks. They don't know anything about what's going on, and they are kept in isolation as much as possible. So, you know, it's only when you go on the internet, you find out the truth, that you become their enemy, that you can find out what's going on. I think in closing, the opportunity that we have here is to support the Lisa McPherson Trust, because that organization is going to be the force that people can get behind so they won't be afraid anymore. I think that as a member of that, I can say that we'll stand up. We'll stand up for Clearwater. And we're not going to allow that sort of harassment, and we're not going to allow that sort of destruction of individual liberty anymore. Because this town's going to change. This town's going to go back to being what it was before they came, which is a part of the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, how would they explain to a public Scientologist right now the wrappings, shall we say, around Fort Harrison? I mean, how would they, if you came in and you say, well, why is everything so dark and closed off?
I'm sure what they've done, which is not true, is to tell them that the protesters, one of which is me, are a violent group of lunatics, and that they are not safe, and that furthermore, that we might be revealing confidential information about the upper levels to them. They are under the misapprehension that if they find out something that's supposed to be secret in Scientology, they could actually get pneumonia and die. Yes, sir, Mayor.
What do you think about the now announced open alliance between the largest legal firm in Pinellas County, the City Commission, and the Chamber of Commerce, because the member of Tim Johnson's law firm is also the incoming president of the Chamber of Commerce.
Well, I think they've got a lot of money. I mean, that's basically what's going on. And that's probably what's occurred over time. Behind the scenes is they're either able to buy or intimidate their way into the community. They were not wanted here, and I know that when Mayor Garvey was mayor, the city, as much as it could, stood against them. But, you know, in time, those people with weaker ethics and thicker pocketbooks are subject to that sort of buying out. Yes, Stacy.
Yeah, Peter, do you feel like Scientology has anything to do with the financial troubles that your company's been having?
It's possible that, as I indicated, we're not rich anymore. It's possible that they have contacted our customers and tried to defame us. It's a common thing that is done to critics of the Church of Scientology. Unfortunately, it's not something that's easy to detect, and I have no certain knowledge of that. Yes.
When you first discovered the information on the internet,
Yes.
and you were at that time really a Scientologist,
Yes.
and you believed that stuff,
Yes.
how is it that you believed what you read on the internet was true?
Because I saw actual court documents. When I saw L. Ron Hubbard's VA file listed on the internet indicating that he was trying to get a disability pension when he wasn't hurt at all in combat, and I compared that with their story about how he was crippled and blinded from war injuries. I mean, you see the documents, it tells you the truth.
Is your ex-wife still in?
Yes, she is a dedicated Scientology person to this day.
I'm sorry to know.
Yeah, me too. Ed.
What would be your general approach to how we would reach people like you used to be, you know, people whose mind support Scientology, to make the information penetrate into their heads?
Actually, the first thing to do, because people are quite dedicated, and maybe Mr. Hassan knows why they're quite dedicated. Probably they might be somewhat dedicated against their will, their best interest rather. But they're quite dedicated to Scientology. However, what is happening with the current management of Scientology is, as Jerry said, they're changing Scientology probably on an almost daily basis. So if anyone really pointed out the fact that the current management has changed the supposed sacred scriptures of L. Ron Hubbard, I think that that would get the first interest. They could begin to see that it really wasn't what they thought it was. It's a gradual thing coming out of a cult. You can't just hit people with the total truth right away. You know, and everybody has a different button.
One more, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Approximately how much money would you estimate that you paid out of Scientology during your...
Oh, I don't have to estimate, ma'am. I know it was $1 million.
$1 million?
Yes, ma'am.
Ah,
Both. Some donations to the building, mostly services on behalf of my ex-wife, myself, and my kids, who, despite the fact that Hubbard said at one point in time you're not supposed to counsel someone until they're 8, for some reason, if you have a lot of money, there's a need to counsel them even earlier.
And if you go in chain lockers as early as 4.
And I think that's all the time we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott.